Get started. Some of you may have noticed that the refreshments table looks a little different this year. The League of Women Voters has adopted a sustainability practices policy for all our events, so we are trying very hard to have a zero waste event to minimize the amount of disposable, non-reusable items that we use, and when we need to have things we dispose of, we're trying to use paper, hopefully easily biodegradable paper, not coated with other things. So we all brought a bunch of mugs, and we're making a little bit of an investment in other kinds of cups and things to bring to our events, and we're looking forward to moving forward with that. The League of Women Voters is dedicated to voter education, whether on national issues or those that only influence a single town and perhaps our neighbors. So today we are all here to learn about Ballot Question 4, which will come before the Needham voters in a few weeks. So I would like to introduce Chair of the Select Board, Dan Matthews, who is going to start the program.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming this morning. My name is Dan Matthews. I'm the chairman of your Board of Selectmen. We're here today to talk a little bit about our proposed replacement of our existing police and fire stations and the various components of that, why we feel it's necessary, what we propose to do, what it costs, and in what particular focus that we have now. This is a plan that has been approved by town meeting, but it can only go forward if the voters approve a question that's on ballot, question 4, which is to authorize the bonding under Proposition 2.5. The total amount of the bonding is $70 million, which is real money, and so we want to make sure we're making every effort at forums like this, and there's another one next Thursday in the evening at Powers Hall, that people can get as much information about this to make an informed choice. Basically, in a nutshell, this is a 3-station project. We want to replace our existing police and fire stations that are at the corner of School and Chestnut and fire station number 2 in the Heights. These stations were built downtown 1931, and the substation that exists in the Heights 1949. A metric that I use to try to give people the example of why it is that we need to do something as big as this. Fire trucks are twice the size that they were when most of us in the room today were kids. They're packed into the stations in such a way that they're inches apart. It's actually, you have to be very careful and skilled to get the equipment out quickly, and time really can mean lives. We need to, if only for response time, we need to do better. And there are other, and they're across the board, whether it is the facilities, the training, the kind of equipment that's used, the methods and the legal requirements for operating public safety, both on the police and fire now, as well as the hazards that the men and women who work in the town face. For all these reasons, there are similar situations in every aspect of the work that they do. We looked at a lot of different options. Retrofitting the stations to try to deal with all of the ADA problems, the programmatic problems, the fact that we don't even have sufficient facilities for our women on the police and fire side. Retrofitting would not be satisfactory. It would actually be prohibitively costly. So the plan is to replace all 3 stations. By doing them together, there are economies of scale. We'll save money, and it allows sequencing so that we'll be able to run both departments, all 3 groups, 24/7 during the construction, utilizing space at the Hillside School after the students have moved to the Sunita Williams with the new elementary school when that opens. So this is actually the lowest cost, best way of doing this, but this is public construction in Massachusetts. It is an expensive proposition. We've done, the Permanent Public Building Committee has done what they can to keep the costs down while not cutting corners that will require us to come back and ask for more later. This, we think that this, we in the town government think this is the right way to go, and we're asking, both reporting to you about what we've done, why, what we're recommending, and to ask for your support. The cost of a residential homeowner, on average, is $388 on the average house over the 30-year bond. Now, the bond payments are higher in the earlier stages and then drop down later, but that $388 is a fair number and may even be a little higher than how it will work out in practice. And the $388 is based on the average home, which is $904,000. So for a lot of the people who that's a stretch for, the $388, their homes are valued at less than $904. That doesn't apply to everybody, but if it does, your cost would be proportionately less. But we're trying to say several things. We recognize that we need to try to deliver value to the taxpayers for what we do. But we also feel that in terms of what the community needs for public safety, this is the best way to go to address a wide range of things that you're going to hear more about now. This is a long-needed program. The new buildings will serve the town for decades to come, and we respectfully ask for your support. And next up is Kate Fitzpatrick, our town manager, who can give you some more detail about this. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Kate Fitzpatrick, town manager. I've probably met all of you at one point. I'm going to give you a little bit more detail about projects and show you some pictures of what they are supposed to look like. I'll call on the chiefs to talk about some of the existing conditions that are in the stations that are the reason why we're embarking on this project. And George Kent, the chair of the Permanent Public Building Committee, will give you a sense of how the projects move forward in Needham and the process that we use to do public construction. One of the things that Chairman Matthews mentioned is the age of the stations, and if you think about the station, that school in Chestnut being built in the midst of the Depression, was an incredibly aspirational facility for that time, and it's lasted quite a long time, and it's a beautiful building, but it really speaks to me as to how people must have been so proud of their community to 1931 building at that size. We don't have data all the way back to 1931, but from 1950, which was 19 years after the station opened, the police department grew from 25 officers and 1,700 calls to now 49, actually now 50, the police department with over 31,000 calls. So the call volume and the activity in the town was obviously drastically. We had 27 firefighters in 1950. We don't have call volume for 50, but we do have 1960, which was 600 calls in 1960, which was 27 firefighters. And by 2015, the number of firefighters was 64, and the department responded to about 4,000 calls. The other thing that's changing rapidly is the community is growing, the population of the community is growing, and the commercial sector is really changing from a single-story manufacturing type of Needham industrial park area to a thriving 10 square-like commercial sector in Needham Crossing on the other side of Route 28. In fact, Chairman Matthews and I had a tour this morning of the new residential facility called the Kendrick, which is on 2nd Avenue, 275 2nd Avenue. There's 390 units. You assume there's going to be probably 1,000 people living over there, and there's 350 units across the street, and we just added 136 units on Greendale Avenue. So virtually all of those units are responded to by Station 2, if I have that correct, Chief. So Station 2, which was in the past, currently is a substation of the main station, will really be a full fire station that will be better positioned to respond to the emergency calls that come from those areas of town. In particular, we're very grateful that we're going to be able to stage a full-time ambulance at Station 2, which we don't now run the full-time ambulance out of Station 1. So that will help us have better response times to that part of town. As Chairman Matthews said, we've been studying this project, and town meeting has been providing funding. The first funding that we got for the current project was in 2015, but for the past 30 years we've been doing master plan studies that said we know we need a new station. Interestingly, every one of those studies has said the people who came before us were very strategic about where they put the stations, and that we've done multiple
studies, I can think of 4 times we've looked at whether we should be relocating any of them. And generally speaking, the best locations to reach 95% of the town in the response times that we are aiming for, the downtown location and the Webster Street location make the most sense. The public safety building at Station 1, which is both a police station and a fire station at the corner of School and Lincoln. We've been planning, you can see there, as far back as 2012. We have asked for, and the community has supported the acquisition of 6 parcels immediately surrounding the fire station and police station. We're using some of them for increased parking for the downtown, for the growing commercial sector in the downtown. But we're also taking a look at moving, and we'll show you the rendering of the new fire police station. If you see the one that says Article 22, November 2013 special town meeting, that's a building we call the Caravan Lane building. It also had a hairdresser and a restaurant. That restaurant changed hands many times, I'm sure you remember. That is actually where the fire station will be constructed, on that parcel, butting right up to the roadway that goes in behind the Middlesex Bank and into the parking lot. So we be doing the project in a phased way. We've actually calculated it's saving the town about $5 million on the cost of the project, because we're building the fire station. The fire department will move right in there, and then we'll take down the existing station and rebuild it as the shared spaces and the police department. So this is a rendering. Technology does a lot of things, but it doesn't ever seem to do color correctly. So the building will not be orange. It won't be anywhere on the orange spectrum. It will be a red brick building. We've seen the bricks. But you can see, I think it's another aspirational building that will fit in nicely to our downtown. You see that the station is actually increasing from 32,000 square feet to about 59,000 square feet. And the vast majority of the increase in square footage is the apparatus bay. We're increasing the apparatus bays from 3 to 4. And as you'll see later in the existing conditions, the apparatus bay will be for apparatus. There won't be anybody working in there, sleeping in there, having their gear stored in there, having washing machines in there. It will just be for equipment. It will also have rear access doors that will help us move our equipment around. But we do intend, the fire department intends to deploy apparatus emergency vehicles out the front on the Chestnut as they do now. You probably will recall the Always Remember 9/11 memorial that's on the corner. It will be shifted slightly, and these pictures don't quite do it justice, but there'll be a lovely plaza there where we'll have people be able to sit as they do now. And this one on the left shows you the angle from where the fire truck is coming out on Chestnut Street. This gives you a view from School Street. And you see the monopole in the distance. We'll talk a little bit about that in a few minutes. This is the view from Lincoln Street. And that is a strangely compressed, maybe somehow in the translation, view from the corner of School and Chestnut, where that pedestrian plaza will be. This is a rendering of Fire Station 2. It is also just about doubling in size, a little bit more, from 9,600 to 22,000 square feet. And you can see there's 3 bays in this proposed rendering as opposed to 2. So again, the vast majority of the increase is in those bays, and it's separating out the firematic things like equipment and gear into special rooms designed for that. Because of the topography of Station 2, if you think about when you go down Webster Street, there's actually a full bay beneath, so we get extra storage by having the full bay beneath. And the hill actually provides us the ability to put in a full-size mechanics bay. When you think of the size of the ladder truck, and if you have to work on the ladder, there's really nowhere in town. In fact, they have to do it outside. We do have a lift that will accommodate it now in town, luckily, but there's just nowhere for our mechanics to work on that equipment. So we're taking advantage of the topography in order to provide that. Another view of the station. We're actually providing an ability for folks to turn off. Very often, people drive into Needham, they come off the highway, they don't know where they are, or they're having some kind of distress. They pull over, and they pull over in front of the apparatus bay, which isn't where we want them to pull over. We do get a lot of walk-ins. I think the chief could talk about that if you have an interest. And so we are providing some parking for the public to come in the doors. Station 2, we have exactly an acre there, so So we don't have the luxury of being able to reconstruct Station 2 and then on the same site. So we have, scoured the town to try to find a site where we could put a temporary fire station. And by serendipity, the Hillside School will be closing for students at the end of this school year, and they'll be moving over to the Williams School on Central Avenue. And we worked with the school committee, and they've agreed to allow us to use that facility for 18 months to 2 years. You see here in the parking lot, if you've ever been in the Hillside, that's where the bus loop is. There'll be accommodations for the firefighters from Station 2, as well as sort of a prefabricated tent structure for the vehicles. The police department will also have to move over when we take down that building. After the fire station is built in the square, they'll move over, and we'll be using some lower levels at the Hillside School in addition to a little bit on the top floor here where the principal's office is. This is, we haven't got bids in yet on what it exactly will look like, but these are examples of how other communities have handled temporary structures for the location of fire apparatus, and trailers for staff. An integral part of this project, which I think it's fair to say none of us really identified when we started this project, is that when we take down 88 Chestnut 99 School Street, where we have a series of antennas that are about 99 feet high, the new building won't have a cupola, and it won't be high enough for us to have our communications infrastructure on. The PPPC actually contracted with a specialist in public safety communications who did propagation studies, including the use of drones, and determined that the system that we have is actually not reaching, and verified what the public safety officials were telling us, that we weren't reaching the whole town, particularly we weren't reaching the other side of the hills in town over into Needham Crossing. So we are also, as well as trying to replace what we have in the square, making significant improvements to the way that dispatch staff can reach police officers and firefighters in the field, and they can call back. We're actually proposing to construct a 4-pole closed-loop microwave system. This is the most current technology, rather than relying on Verizon copper wire, which is strung through the town, and which is subject not only to failure with downed trees and squirrels, was also not being any longer supported by Verizon. So the major choices for running our own fiber all through town, or having these 4 locations, which an astute town meeting member last week pointed out looks like the Star Trek symbol, which I hadn't thought of before. So we're looking at 4 places in town. 2 of them are owned by us. One at the station itself in downtown, which is critical for the dispatch. It needs to be next to the dispatch center for the communication to occur in the field. And then there would be a 199-foot lattice tower at the RTS behind the storage building that the town is proposing to construct there for DPW. We're working with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and the county to put a tower adjacent to the Norfolk County House of Correction. And then we're looking to lease real estate essentially on a tower that is at Cabot Street, and you can see them. I know you can see them from Highland Avenue. Those very large towers. There's a 900-foot and about a 500-foot that are over there. For a little bit of context, there are several towers behind the RTS on land not owned by the town, and those are as high as 650 feet. So this proposed structure. So the structure proposed for downtown Needham is a monopole, which is seen by many as being less industrial or less intrusive. With it would have microwave dishes and some whip antennas on it. That's a view from the street. This is an example of the lattice tower that would go up at the RTS. My recollection is it's as much as 300 or so feet back from the roadway. Is that about right? That's right. So that's an example of what that would look like. We're also, one of the ways that we were able to bring the price down on the current project is, instead of putting this lattice tower all the way in the back up near the solar array, where we would have to run both the road and electricity and go through wetlands, we're actually kind of nestling it into these, nestle a 199-foot structure behind the building, and we're able to use, save the money on the site costs, and also use a corner of the building for the equipment that is associated with the tower, electronics and things like that. This is an example of Plymouth, a public monopole with microwave technology on it in Plymouth, just to give you a sense of what it would look like if it was standing next to you. And the question 4 itself is asking the town to appropriate $69,995,000, some of which has already been spent on the design, to perform this work. And as Chairman Matthews said, we believe that by doing the work together, we'll achieve economies of scale. It also has one construction manager at risk, and that's a method by which the PPDC, and Mr. Kent can probably outline better than I, but it involves the contractor in the project at the design phase, and it helps reduce the kind of finger pointing that can happen on major projects of this size. So this shows existing debt, blue, existing and approved debt that's already in existence on projects that we have already constructed. Public safety buildings would represent the red. And then if the Mitchell School proceeds in the manner that we have assumed it for the sake of planning, we don't think that's probably the next major project on the town's plate. You can see that where that would go in the out years. Now, as Chairman Matthews said, on the average single-family home of $904,000, the average increase in the tax bill using a single tax rate is $436. The town has used a split tax rate since the 1980s, and so we're showing you there that the average increase using the historic split tax rate would be about $388. Again, on that average single-family home, some of which are lower and some of which are higher. We'll be happy to answer any questions at the question and answer portion of this session. And the last thing that I would talk about here is the project schedule. We're the town to vote on 2 weeks from Tuesday. The public safety building construction would begin in January. By October of next year, Station 2 would relocate to its temporary quarters over at Hillside School. In June of 20, the fire station opens, and then the police would relocate over to Hillside. In April 2021, Fire Station 2 is projected to open, and they would move out of the Hillside School. And then in December of 2021, the police station would relocate to its new facility. So we're looking at about a 3-year process from start to finish. So with that, I would turn it over to Mr. Kennedy. Then the chief will talk about existing issues.
At this point, you're probably saying, wow, this is a big project. How in the world is this going to be managed to make sure that we do keep the costs to what we projected? And how are we going to get all this done on schedule? Those are very good questions. Most of you are probably familiar with the Permanent Public Building Committee. We've existed now for about 22 years, formed by town meeting back in 1996 to make sure that we manage projects successfully. I reminded Karen a few minutes ago that I stood in front of town meeting in 1996 and I made the statement, there's no reason why any project should not be done on time and under budget. And people, even to the last town meeting, reminded me that that's what I said, to make sure we keep that promise, which we've tried to do over the last 22 years. And we've been very successful at doing that. So one might ask the question, what does the Permanent Public Building Committee do anyway? Besides meeting every 2 weeks during the year to manage the projects, we manage 3 aspects of the project, which really contains the whole project, which is scope, the scope of the project to make sure that it doesn't grow or change over time unless it absolutely has to for some reason. The second thing it manages is the schedule. The schedule is a very complicated aspect of this project, and I'll mention a couple of things in a minute. And the last is tied together. If you don't manage the scope properly, it's going to be impossible to manage the cost. If you don't manage the schedule properly, it's going to be impossible to manage the cost. So the PBDC manages scope, schedule, and cost. How do we do that? We do that in a number of ways. Number one, we have a committee made up of 7 permanent members and 2 members at large. The 2 members at large, whether they like it or not, are police chief and fire chief. And I'll mention them and what their contribution has been to date in a minute. But that's the 9-member committee. The other 7 members are professionals in a number of different areas. My background is I'm a registered professional engineer, so I have a lot of experience in the engineering construction area. And the committee should, through its capability, really manage the project successfully as we've done with all of our other projects. Let me mention, Kate mentioned that this project has been going on for a long time. Well, for at least the last almost 2 years, we have met as a working group. And the working group is architect, contractor, individuals involved, Kate, myself, Steve Popper and his team, the Facilities Construction Management Group, work together probably, well, sometimes it seemed like it was once a week, but it was probably on average about once every 2 weeks, to really look at the details of what was necessary to include in the scope of the project. And what was of value and what wasn't of value, we really analyzed all of the aspects of the scope of the project in order to come up with an estimate that we did just recently. That committee, by the way, also had your police chief and fire chief on that committee, providing input, details that were necessary for them to manage their aspects of the work. And what we tried to do during that whole process was to make sure that the scope wasn't something that is beyond the bounds of what's necessary, but is actually what's required in order to do an effective job, not just for now, but for the next 50 years or so. It's really important to look out at that and see what that scope should be. And as we looked at the schedule, we said this is a difficult schedule to meet. And so we really needed to look at getting involved with our construction manager early on in the project. We have a process in the state that allows us to bring in a construction manager before we do all the bidding on the project and get that construction manager on board as we're planning the project. That's a really smart thing to do, is to get the contractor with you as a member of the team, as opposed to just someone who's coming in and bidding and having to select the low bid for the project. This we've done, and that contractor has been working with us for a year and a half or so on all the aspects of the project. The reason why we did that, besides it being a smart thing to do, it's really a necessary thing. There are so many pieces of this project that need to be integrated together to make sure that they fit and are done right and on time, that we needed that with the construction manager to help us do that. If we didn't do that, we would have had multiple projects that we as a town would have to manage, and those multiple projects might not all, the construction managers in all those projects might not really help us integrate that properly. So this should help us do that. So the scope, schedule, and cost are critically important. The police chief and fire chief helped us manage the process of getting the scope correct for what we need. The building committee is supported by the facilities management construction team with Steve Popper and his team. It's really, they're critical to the process. Another thing about Permanent Public Building Committee is that we really don't report to anyone in the town except town meeting. So we have that responsibility to make sure that the costs are what they are and try to manage that cost process. And we do have to report to town meeting if that cost changes or schedule changes for any reason. We work very closely with the rest of the members of the town. The Permanent Public Building Committee is a group that works very effectively on all of these aspects. If you have nothing to do on a Monday evening, you're more than welcome to come to our meetings, which are about every other Monday night throughout the year. So that's how the Permanent Public Building Committee works and how we expect to manage scope, schedule, and cost on this project.
Good morning. My name is Dennis Condon. I'm the fire chief. I'm here with Chief John Schlittler. We're going to talk to you a little bit about the stations and the problems that we have in the current conditions. So when we talk about the fire station, there's really three words that you should keep in mind. Inadequate, unsafe, and unhealthy. And those are the things that I really want to focus on. The buildings are, they were built a long time ago when things were a lot different. When we moved into Station 1 in 1931, if you look at the old town reports, you'll see that you still had one piece of horse-drawn apparatus in that building. Things have changed dramatically in those days. People don't drive around in Model Ts anymore. They have big Suburbans and things that, garages have been built accordingly to fit those. So you can see in this picture here, in the top view, that says Station 2, that's Engine 4 in the front and Engine 2 in the back. What you can't see is in the back of Engine 2, that is actually touching the wall at the back of the station. And in the front, there's a space about this wide between the front bumper and the door. So when the firefighters go over to the ladder truck, if they're assigned to that, they have to walk, not between the trucks, but up to the front. They have to walk sideways like this, to, like you're doing a limbo dance or something, to between the door and the truck, and to get to their apparatus. So needless to say, that's a slowdown of the process, and it becomes a safety issue for a lot of people. If you look down at the lower left, that's our quint at Station 1. That's the door. You can see on the left there is coming from our admin onto the apparatus floor. Again, it's a space of about 1.5 feet. You're coming right into the wheel well of a 46-foot truck. So if you're not familiar with the building or what's going on, and if they have a run and are leaving the building, you're opening that door and immediately steps forward into a truck that's moving. That's not safe. And you can see how that walkway, you can barely fit. The primal vent is the hose that is hooked up to the exhaust, and that's trying to keep the firefighters safe, healthy. But the fact is that exhaust comes in and out of that building all the time. In the pole holes going upstairs, there's no barriers, so the exhaust just comes right up to the living area, and that's unhealthy. This is police.
Thank you. As Chief Conant said, I'm John Schluppen, I'm the police chief. First of all, this station we've talked about, it's been a great station for us. We understand that. It's served us, and it's served the community well for over the years. But it's at the end of its useful life cycle, it lacks functionality. And then we believe there are several issues that create a safety hazard for our officers and for the people that visit the station. Policing and technology have changed dramatically over the years, and we've struggled to keep up with that change due to the restrictions of the building. And the building itself is inadequate in many areas, but it's also unsafe. And we'll touch on some of those things. This here is, the picture is the lift that we use for people that have mobility issues to get up to the second floor. We do have quite a few meetings in the station, and the ability to get people up to the second floor creates an issue. If you see the picture on the left, there's a little ramp that comes down, and you can put somebody that's in a wheelchair in that, and it's able to take them to the second floor. But a lot of times people that have mobility issues, whether it be with a walker, with a cane, or have some other types of issues, we have no other way to get them up to the second floor. And we lack, obviously, space down on the first floor to deal with that. As we go through the pictures, we'll talk about some of the other issues that create safety hazards within the police department. And we'll talk about when these pictures are done, there are probably some areas that aren't have pictures to show, but we'll talk about them briefly. This is our crime lab. This is where our detectives use to process evidence that's taken from crime scenes. If you look to the left, there's a little hood there. That's our fuming tank. So what a fuming tank is, if we remove evidence from a crime scene, whether it be a B&E, assault, battery, bank robbery, and so forth, we take this here, and this is where we process our evidence for fingerprints. And when we use the fuming tank, what we do is we have a fish tank, and we have a little hot plate in it. We have one little dish that we put glue in, and the other is this hot water. We heat up the glue, and the glue vapor is mixed with the water, and it sticks to the piece of evidence. And that way we're able to develop latent fingerprints off that. But the problem with this is that the ventilation from that does not work. So what happens is the fumes from the glue and the processing that we're doing actually comes up and back in to the crime lab. And as you can see, we're using, it looks pretty full, and we're using that right now as a little bit of overflow for our evidence room. So as you can see that it's very tight, it's not functional, and especially with the fumes that are coming back into that room, it's not safe for the detectives to do their job. This is probably one of the more difficult areas within the police department. This is our female locker room. Excuse me. We right now have 5 full-time female police officers. We have 4 or 5 female administrative staff. This is a bathroom. It's a bathroom that you would see in any other building, but we have to double this as a locker room. So you can see that the blue lockers are there. So we stuff the female officers into the small bathroom. So we're creating a space as a bathroom. And one of the biggest things is if you look in the shower, if we turn the shower on, which we can't now, because when you turn it on, the water leaks into the fire department. So it's obviously an area that has to be addressed. Both locker rooms are tough. The locker room, the male locker room, was not built with air conditioning in it. So our officers go back in there. Obviously, they've been in the car, they've been out on the road. They're hot, they're sweaty. There's no air conditioning or no room ventilation in there in the locker room. So when they take off all their gear, you know, they have 10 to 20 pounds worth of gear. They have a bulletproof vest that's extremely hot. It doesn't dry, the air doesn't ventilate, and creates a difficult situation in both locker rooms.
So, a couple of points that John made with this crime lab. You can see that that was all like very congested. And as a little anecdote, a couple of weeks ago we went over to the police department. They had a small fire because they had a toaster oven where there was really no room in the to put anything else, and somebody had to roll up paper towels next to this toaster oven, and when they put their lunch in, that caught on fire. But it gives you an idea of how unsafe the buildings really are because they're so small and so jam-packed with everything. This is our day room at Station 1. This is where the guys will be at night. They might watch a ball game or in between calls if they're not training or whatever. What you can't see in this picture, 2 strategically placed pasta pots that collect rainwater from the roof after rain that drips in to the building. Again, you know, that is unhealthy as the rainwater's coming in. We probably can't see there's mold probably growing, and it's an unhealthy situation for the guys. You can see there's not enough outlets, so there's wires all over the place, extension cords. What I've said to a number of people when we give the tours of the station, if we were to inspect the buildings, if it was somebody else's, we'd probably fail it. So the building is not what it should be. These are the dorm rooms. Again, they're beat up, they're small, they look at the pictures. For myself, I spent 26 years as an officer at Station 2, and the officers' dorm room is on the apparatus floor. That bunk is about 10 feet from the ladder truck. So I don't know how many people in town sleep 10 feet away from a 46-foot diesel truck, but I did it for 26 years, and that cannot be helped. So that's the situation that they have today. In the new building, it's going to be drastically different. In the new building, they're designed to have a hot, cold, and warm zone. So the hot zone would be that area where there could be contaminants, the apparatus floor where the gear, you know, in the exhaust and so forth that are down there. That's sealed off through like a warm zone of stairwells and so forth, but it's sealed off from that living area upstairs. So in this separate air handling, so you don't get any of that contamination upstairs when where you live and where administration is. So that's a really good thing. These dorm rooms, it looks like they're separate, but that's 3 in 1. And in the new station, they'll all be separate. There'll be a desk in there where the firefighters can study for promotion or learn about different things. There'll be computers. And it gives us the ability to, no matter who you are or where you come from, what you look like, you can have your own room, and it's not everybody's getting together in a ward type of situation.
This is a picture of our current evidence room, and when I showed you in the crime lab, we had some bigger evidence that we had to store in there because it wouldn't fit in here. The thing with the evidence room, and it looks like it's an unorganized mess, but it's actually organized. It's just we're lacking space. The problem with evidence is we have to keep a piece of evidence until the court case has been adjudicated. So, and that when we say that, that means if somebody's been arrested, they've gone to court, and they've been convicted, and they're in jail, say they go to jail for 3 to 5 years, and they're on probation for another 3 to 5, we have to keep that evidence until that time period runs out. So there's a lot of evidence that we have to keep for an extended period of time. And chain of custody, as we've seen in the news over the last several years, it's such an important thing. And when you have a situation like this, you open yourself up to a little bit of liability because we're trying to move things around to try and fit the storage of the evidence, and it's extremely important. The new station, if we're lucky enough to get it, we'll have an evidence processing area, so when our officers come in from the road with a piece of evidence, they'll be able to go to an area right off the roll call room, right off where they come in. They'll be able to fill out the proper paperwork, place the evidence sticker on it, and submit it into a secure room where the evidence officer will be able to get it, be able to tag it, log it in, and store it properly.
So another part of the unhealthy thing is the storage of the bunker gear, the turnout gear, the gear that we wear when we go into a fire or in a car accident. And, currently, right now, we store our gear on hooks in the apparatus floor. So people walking by, there's contaminants that they may get on their person, and the gear is getting cross-contaminated from itself, and it is also getting contaminated from the exhaust fumes of the trucks coming in. So even when guys aren't working, their gear's hanging there and it's getting contaminated. In the new building, there'll be separate lockers like this, but it'll also be in a separate room off of the apparatus floor. So it's away from that. Again, that room has its own gear handling system, so it's not bringing those contaminants upstairs. A couple of years ago, town meeting was very gracious to us by affording us the opportunity to buy a second set of bunker gear and to start a process where the bunker gear is getting turned over on a regular basis. So the idea with the second set is when we go to a fire, we come back, throw the gear into these extractor washing machines, which are heavy duty, cleans them off, but we have to stay in service. So if your gear's getting washed and it's all damp and in the dryer, you can't exactly wear it. So that second set allows us to stay back in service, and it keeps the stuff getting clean, and the firefighters are staying healthy. In the new building, there's going to be a decon room for that purpose. So they'll have the extractor in there and the washer, the dryer. Currently, in the building, we have, I don't think we have a picture, but the dryer is in a garage with at the SCBA bottle filler with the fire extinguishers, with a lawnmower, with some pumps that we use during rainy weather, and that's all jammed into one spot. And that's not the way for proper hygiene of this type of equipment. But this is another rendering of some of the other buildings that are out there. The apparatus floor, you can see, is large amounts of space between the vehicles. Firefighters can walk between the vehicles without tripping over things that are on the ground. They can walk between the vehicles without fear of the vehicle moving. There's space for them to go, and that's what it looks like. The new building will have a similar paint scheme on the floor like this, so that each piece of apparatus will have its spot, and it makes it easier for the firefighters backing them in, so that they're in the right spot and they aren't hitting something else. So just the one thing I would leave you with, that we've done a number of tours of the buildings, and I recognize some of you folks for going on the tours. There hasn't been a single person who has walked through the tour who has said, "Why do you need a new station? This is beautiful, this is great." The reaction, generally speaking, is, "This is horrible, we're embarrassed, we're sorry for you guys. I'm voting for it, where can I get a lawn sign?" So that's the general reaction I've been getting, so vote for number 4.
These are just some other pictures of the officers and firefighters in action when they deal with the community. Again, I'll speak to the sentiments of the chief in terms of get the word out. We do have other additional tours that are coming up. We'll be there. It makes a difference when you see it eyes on. These pictures, they do a great job, but there's nothing like seeing it in person. So encourage everybody that you know to come and take one of the tours, because I think it'll make a difference in seeing the conditions that we're currently working in. These are some of the things that we do in the community with our kids in terms of safety and community policing and so forth. So we're doing a lot to be in the community. So these are just some examples of that. Everyone wants to be a firefighter. When they're younger, they want to be a police officer. They get old firefighters. Right? That's it. Thank you.
Last time I cut the system, I tried to put everything away, but all the sound went off too, so I'm just going to leave that up there if it's okay. So can our speakers come up? I'm Karen Price, president of the League of Women Voters, and chiefs, I think we have enough seats for everyone. We're going to open it up for question and answer. I believe there's one tour left. Is that right? You haven't scheduled anymore. And there was one of Fire Station 2 yesterday. And the last one of the downtown one is, as Kate said, Saturday, October 27th from 10 to 11. It's in the program. Okay, we're going to do oral questions, and anyone who has a question to ask will bring a microphone so it can be recorded for television. Yeah, see what I can do.
Jean McKnight, and just a quick question I'm remembering from the presentation at town meeting. The average of $388 per average residential tax bill was an average over an extended period of time. There was also a number quoted that was at the peak year. Just either of you remember what that number was?
Yeah, counting the effect of the tax shift from the business side, it's 577 in the peak year. When the project starts, on the numbers that we have, which includes some conservative assumptions. And when I say conservative, that means it won't be more than 577 on the average. Thereafter, it will slowly decrease, both as an absolute number and as a percentage of the tax bill until the bonds are retired entirely.
Questions?
Hi, I'm Ann Hyatt. I have a question about energy consumption of the new buildings because they're quite a bit bigger. Does anyone know if we're going to be spending more money on increased energy consumption, or if the buildings have been constructed in such a way that they're really energy efficient? Thank you.
I can speak to the energy efficiency part of it. All of our buildings, as they're constructed, are designed to be very energy efficient in all the aspects, windows, roofs, all the boundary between the outside and the inside of the building is designed to be energy efficient. In terms of additional costs, I think, Kate, you had some numbers that might reflect the additional costs.
Well, we are expecting additional costs because while the buildings will be much more energy efficient, they'll be bigger and they'll have actual air conditioning in places where we don't have it now, and more electronics needs more cost. Those, I don't have the exact numbers, but they have been carried on an estimated per square foot basis in our capital planning. We also have slight increases in the areas of custodial help and supplies and those kinds of things, but they have all been part of our plan.
I think Bob had a question.
I'll be brief, and I'm directing this more to the audience here. I'm 90 years old, and I've lived in Needham for 50 years. And I cannot thank you folks for what you're doing and what needs to be done. And I hope that you will be ambassadors and go out from this meeting to your fellow towns meeting members and friends and families that this is vitally, vitally needed. And I am not in one way persuaded that we should do anything but vote positively for this appropriation of the $70 million. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob.
Carol Didmore, this is to the Dennis Common. Do you have in the future any new fire trucks which are going to be bigger? And if you are planning to get new fire trucks, is the new station going to be big enough to accommodate these new fire trucks so we don't have the problem we had before?
Yeah, the stations will definitely be big enough for it. At Station 2, our ladder truck, which is one of our biggest pieces of apparatus, is roughly about 4 inches from the top of the ladder to the ceiling as they come in, and about 2 inches on either side. In the new building, the doors will have about 4 or 5 feet at the top, in like 4 feet on either side. In fact, I believe that we could actually have the doors open as they're leaving. So one of the fact is with the various fire trucks over the years, they have gotten bigger, but it becomes a finite size that they actually can be, and that's predicated on bridges and underpasses and so forth. So we're pretty much at the largest they're going to get, but the current building is just too small for those.
Thank you. My next question is to whoever wants to answer. We have had almost 400 new apartments over in the industrial park. We have 100 and whatever it is, 50 that are on Greendale Avenue. These are a lot more people, and we are going to need more fire and more police. Do the people who are renting have to help pay for this, or is it only the homeowners, which I think it's only the homeowners who pay for the tax on this new building?
Yeah, everybody effectively pays property taxes in Needham. The renters, of course, they're paying their landlord, and the landlord owes us the assessed tax on the property. We keep using the number that focuses on the single family home because that's the one where the majority of voters live in. But apartment buildings are assessed at the same fair market value and taxed at the same rate, which is about 1% a year as the base, and proportionately assuming that the landlords pass that through to their tenants, it will cost. Now, frankly, when you look at some of the rental properties around town, I think it's more, their rents are more based on what the market will bear, which is a lot, but it has to do with rents in comparable communities. So there's not an absolute one-to-one, but yes, they do pay. The businesses pay more. We use a split tax rate, which Kate referred to, that effectively shifts. It's equivalent to the business being taxed at 175% in their rate, as if the fair market value. That effectively is a savings of 11% for the homeowners. The reason for the difference of 75 up for the business and 11 down for the homeowners is because there's a lot more homeowners. Just a second thing that's kind of a footnote to that is part of the reason for the way we're going about the project, including the fact that the current station in the Heights is built as a substation. That's what it was originally designed for in the 50s. There is, as you said, a lot more development. The biggest buildings and the largest number of apartments are on that side of town. So the idea is that the new station will house a full-time ambulance. And we are going to be increasing the staffing to which we're phased in. We've received a grant, in fact, to start the fire staffing increase, which we've received and put into place the last few weeks. So we're not throwing money at this, but we're very serious about making sure that this meets public safety needs for a long time, and having the ambulance there will make a big difference to the residents all around town.
Dave Sherman, Hillside Avenue. Gentlemen, thank you for your service and the service of the officers you command. Two questions. One to the lady's question about future needs for size of fire engines and fire apparatus. I don't hear a tremendous limit imposed by engineering on the lengths of the trucks, and will the new building accommodate whatever length is in the pipeline for newer apparatus? Secondly, is there any state or federal money that can or is coming in to support this?
Again, the lengths of the bays are such that it will accommodate anything foreseeable in the near future. I can't imagine trucks getting any longer than they are. Part of that is the ladders that we need are only a certain length. It's usually the ladder truck that's the longest, and there are 100-foot ladders. Much more than that, you need a crane type of apparatus, and they actually make them, but they're not really for fire service. So yes, the length of the building is sufficient to house vehicles going forward for many, many years. Yeah, so we received a SAFER grant from FEMA to help with the additional staffing. We were given the grant over a 3-year period to pay for 8 firefighters. And as Chairman Matthews said, that the idea is to put a second full-time ambulance at Station 2. That currently we have a full-time ambulance, and we have we take people, we cross-man them on another piece of apparatus, we take them off if there's a secondary call. Those secondary calls are getting greater and greater. We have tertiary calls, and we have to call out of town. With the new building, we'll be allowed to be able to service people down at Needham Heights immediately, while not taking away from Needham Center. If there's a second call in the Needham Center area, that apparatus from the Heights, the ambulance from the Heights will be going to that, and vice versa. So we will have all the time 2 ALS ambulances, and ALS, for those who don't know, is advanced life support. That's the highest life support you can get in the field from any source. So it gives Needham the greatest protection as far as ambulance and emergency medicine is concerned that's out there. And it allows us to really service the folks and the increased numbers of calls that we're expecting from this new development that's going on down there, and quite frankly, the new development that probably will come along with it later on as the years pass.
So I think the question was also whether there's state or federal money for the building itself. And, you know, unlike school buildings where the Commonwealth will participate, in Needham it's about 30% roughly that we get, there isn't a comparable program for police and fire. And it's one of the reasons that we've been working over the last year to really cut the costs as much as we can by, you know, co-locating and working through other projects. So there isn't that opportunity. Like the chief said, we are receiving one of the highest grants in the Commonwealth from FEMA, about 1.7, just under 1.7 million for the firefighters to phase them in. So that is something that we did work on in order to staff the station.
Question?
John Kirk, Warren Street. I think the general sense that I'm hearing from folks is that there's no doubt that the facilities as they currently exist need to be replaced and upgraded, but there are some significant questions not related to that, so we have to do it. But here's what I'm hearing. Why now? Generally speaking, when there's a sense of urgency around this kind of thing, it's because there's funds that need to be secured from the state or federal. That isn't the case here. If we waited, would there be funds potentially available downstream? Folks are looking around for a comparable cost project, and it would be great if you could point to some examples that are comparable in terms of scope. Not finding a lot out there. Generally, individual buildings are significantly less. Even adding them up, they're putting 3 projects together. They seem to be less than the 70 million that we're looking at here. So just interested on comparables, and I'm sure they're out there. Another is the downtown location. Some of the most valuable property that we have in town. Is there another spot? And then just small indications like, are we really controlling costs when we have a firing range in the police station? Is that, how much does that cost? And are there other elements of scope that could be eliminated to eliminate cost? So those are my questions.
That's okay. Actually, there's a very comparable project, a public safety building of about 50,000 square feet going up in Dedham. And I believe it's within $10 or $20 of our average cost for construction. Is that about right? So very similar. There is a chart that we can get put up on the website that the PBC did about a year ago. We were about right in the middle of the cost, the construction cost portion. With respect to why now, we have, this is a partial answer. We've been working on this a long time. We know the need is there. We're on the brink of significant cost increases, particularly with respect to steel. The market is so good in the city of Boston and the suburbs that the cost of labor is very high. In fact, we've been told by the construction manager that if we're moving off a year, we should assume a 10% increase per year over the foreseeable future. So 10% on 70 million is a lot, so we really also feel that we could take advantage of the historically low interest rates if we start now to get that done. Other than the firing range, was there another one?
Location.
Oh, location. So I think there's a number of answers to that question. It is land that we own, and the town meeting has over and over again, as you've seen on the slide, agreed that expansion of that station is necessary, and we've acquired all those properties, some early on at a discount and some later at a premium. We've done at least, as I said, at least 4 that I've been involved with studies that show how we can reach, particularly with fire apparatus, because our police officers are typically out in the community. We can reach 95 to 96% of the community from the stations that we have. There's only a couple of places where it takes us longer than the NFPA standards would suggest, road ambulance and infrastructure fires. It's land that we already own. When we went through trying to find a place for the Williams School, for example, we ended up spending $7 million to acquire property, and there really isn't much that's out there that happened to be somebody who had a huge parcel and also owned other homes around it. So the location of the downtown is important from a public safety perspective. It's also important because the community is essentially landlocked and there isn't anything available. Do you want to add to that? No. Did you want to speak to the financial value of the project?
The biggest issue with having a firing range, initially we did cut down the size. It was a 6-bay range, now it's down to a 4-bay range. And the biggest issue for us is we're mandated by the state to qualify with our firearms. Only once a year, but then we talk about proficiency. Our officers are going to respond with the way they're trained. And if we're going to train once a year on firearms, how proficient can they be with those weapons? And it's not, it's all about officers making the right decision based on their training. If we fire once a year, they're not going to be proficient with those weapons in order to deal with the situation. And currently, right now, we use Hawkinton Gun Club. And so we have to travel an hour out there. We're in the midst of using a public, or it's a private club that's open all the time. So we're in the midst of people coming in and out during our training. So, but the issue when we go out to Hawkinton is, every time we go out there, you can see this development that's growing closer, and that's one of the biggest issues with why we're so far out. There's not a lot of space that we can train in terms of gun ranges around where we are. So other options are Boone Island and Boston. The Medfield range is right along Route 27, and there are issues in terms of availability for that. So it's really limited in terms of where we can go, and the concern is that given the next 4 or 5 years to 10 years, the trend right now is that these ranges are starting to go by the wayside, and the availability of these ranges for our officers to train are not going to be available. And at that point, we're going to be in a situation where we're going to be looking for a place to go. So we do a ton of training on de-escalation, use of other what I mean by de-escalation is using our less lethal means. So what we try and change is people, I always think, feel that, we train to shoot, and that's not the case. It's just as important to have that training in situations when you don't need to shoot, you de-escalate, and you use your taser, you use your OC, which is like a mace spray. So having the range within the station gives us the opportunity to train multiple times a year, and we're able to control the lighting, the setting, the training requirement within that range itself to allow our officers to receive the proper training that they need to do to be proficient with that weapon. Currently, we had taser training the other day. We had to borrow mats from one of the schools and put them in the garage. So we would do a taser training in the garage, which houses our vehicles. So I understand it's a legitimate question, but the need is there. The availability for a range in the upcoming years from all trends is not going to be there. So again, we kept in mind, we tried to be conscious of the scope of it, and we did cut it back significantly, but we were able to work within those conditions to give our officers a proper training.
And the cost of the range, $800,000 all told, is that about right? 500,000.
So we have to pay for officers to travel for overtime. We have to pay the gun club rental fees and so forth. And these prices are only going to go up. We'll be able to train on duty, so that will be able to save us some cost savings in terms of overtime. We have to pay if we went to other locations such as Medfield and Boston. We have to pay for their range people to be on scene with our range people. So now we're paying for other departments overtime. And there is a possibility as these ranges do close that we might be able to get some income from other departments that want to use our range because they don't have the locations to go use.
Okay, other questions? Carol had a hand up.
Dennis wanted to add something.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on the location of the departments. Station 1 and Station 2 are so strategically located in town that it's amazing that an engineer didn't use a computer program to figure it out. But they came up with these a long time ago. They're situated near the major arteries throughout town, and our response times are exceptional. And if you were to move one, you probably would have to build 3 stations because you would be, once you move, those response times to certain areas would suffer. Other areas would be beneficial, but you probably then would have to put in 3 strategically placed stations. So the station locations, for my perspective, response time are really exceptional compared to some of our surrounding communities. I understand that, you know, the land is valuable, and that's a great point, but the value of that response time when needed, I think, outweighs whatever profit might be taken from selling that land.
Focusing on the question of the override itself, what considerations did you all have for using some other sources for the funds outside of the override funds themselves? For example, is there some money available out of the regular tax levy that could have gone towards paying this? And I understand there's some very particular things about overrides, but could you address that, or are there any other funds available that could have been used?
So what's available is borrowing and then using the ongoing tax levy. And we did pull some pieces of equipment out of the borrowing and put them in our capital plan to spend cash in the future because they're things that either we wouldn't necessarily need right away or that we would need anyway. So we pulled out, for instance, about $600,000, is that about right, for mobile and portable radios because we know we need them no matter whether we have the building or not. That's an example of we had some fitness equipment that we're going to pay cash for. So there was any number of items that could have been in the borrowing, but we really don't want cash. Another example is we negotiated a mitigation payment with the developer of the Kendrick, which is the 390-unit apartment building in Needham Crossing, and that money was used to fund police fire equipment and also entirely funded the purchase of the last property that we bought, the Caravan Lane property that facilitated the construction. So we negotiated funds from developers, and we're using tax levy where we can, and there's just simply no way to put a project of this scope within the town's ability to borrow in its levy supported debt.
Question?
Yeah, okay, Karen, sure. That's actually an excellent answer, but you can always arrange, we have an operating budget, and we have a capital budget, and we have a lot of goals that we're trying to achieve. In theory, you can always scale things back, but that means in your operating budget, that means you're reducing services, which generally means staffing to do whatever it is that we're trying to get done, and that includes not only in public safety, but in the schools, which are very important to people in the community. And if you start, so if you're borrowing within the levy, within the tax levy, without asking for additional funds, potentially you're pushing on your operating costs, or you're delaying things that you need to be doing. We have one of the shorthand ways of saying this is a prosperous community. We're very fortunate to have the resources we do, but those resources are not unlimited. They don't meet all of the demands of the things that people ask us for. We have a long, George was talking about the meetings of his committees. There are at least a half a dozen major committees in town that work on trying to get basically focusing volunteer input from the homeowners and the residents to try to say what's the best way to decide what should move forward and what should be delayed, how to scale back, and what we need to invest in. Some of the other projects or things that we're trying to do that we're trying to make sure we're able to do at once. We've seen that we're adding to the high school to put the extra space on for the enrollment that we have there. We are going to try, we're scheduled to implement full-day kindergarten, which is something that people wanted, but that's a significant increase. It starts next year. And that's an operating cost and also has a capital cost, because on one elementary school we needed to add extra classrooms because you need more space. Voters, we felt that people wanted to replace the Rosemary building. We did that, and the pool. We did, and that had to be done on a timeline, and we've done it, and hopefully it's going to give us great value. People sure loved it when we were able to get it open this summer, but that's done within the levy, and we really felt that it was necessary to replace the Memorial Park building, which did not comply with any of the applicable codes and had long outlived its usefulness. So there was a $6 million commitment there. Those are the kind of trade-offs that we make within the town government. But we try to make sure that the process is open, that everybody gets to have a fair say, that the committees, as we try to emphasize, public construction is expensive, but we do everything that we can to keep the costs down and to make sure that the designs that we use are things that we can build without change orders and not have to come back and ask for more money later, and hopefully the voters get good service on it. But this particular decision is one that really requires us to set it out separately, ask the voters for the fund. We work, as you can see, we work pretty hard on it, but that's going to be the call, your call, and I hope that that's satisfactory to you.
Okay, we have time for a couple more. 1, 2, 3, and 4. 4 more.
Hi, John Carty, Oak Street in Needham. I have 2 questions. One about the 388 and additional taxes, and one about the project schedule. Mr. Chairman, regarding the 388, is that the total amount we pay over the 30 years, or is it per year, meaning $640 more?
Yeah, the short answer is it comes out to about 11,000. It's an average per year during the 30-year life of the bond. There are a few things that might bring it down a little bit, including the fact that we use a 7% borrowing assumption. But as long as municipal bonds continue to be tax-free, we will almost certainly get a better rate than that, so there'll be something less. But no, it's not 388 and say thank you. We probably wouldn't be having that meeting. No, this is a serious commitment. It's 388 a year for 30 years.
Okay, I think it would be helpful if that was clarified in future meetings, that really we're asking people to come up with $11,000.
Well, over time. If the average taxpayer in town in that $900,000 house right now is paying a $10,700 bill, during 30 years, that person will be paying somewhere north of $321,000 in property taxes if they stay there the whole time and the tax bill remains low. Yeah,
correct. So they're paying a lot already. Then.
Yeah, Yes, they are.
Okay.
I just have to try to be frank, because I agree with you. Taxes are the price of civilization. A big problem that we in local government and all government perceive is that a lot of the public has been allowed to believe, just because it works better politically, that you're entitled to things and that really you're already paying too much. No. We really try to break it down. We try to be candid about what we're doing. We try to make sure that the information is straight. But no, this is a real bill. We respect the money that is provided to us, and we try to do the best with it. But yes, it costs money to do the things that we need to do, and that's one of the reasons we're asking for your support. And then there was a question about sequencing. Maybe is that for George? Okay.
Did you?
Sure,
Did
so
you
the
ask?
second question is, I want to talk about schedule. I had hoped to see some kind of timeline in the presentation, and, you know,
There was
with
a
more,
timeline.
with more detail on year 1, year 2, you know, how many years is this going out?
If you look in the FAQ document, I think you'll see the timeline.
There's also quite a bit of information of every presentation ever been made, including construction project planning on the town's website under new police and fire stations. So there's a lot of information up there. There's a brief timeline.
I think if you have specific questions,
I think what's the total amount of time?
We can give you
We-
the short answer.
3 years.
We'll start the project at the beginning of 2019, assuming we get the right vote, and we'll finish the project at the end of 2021.
Is there a penalty, how the contracts are going to be written with the contractor? If they take longer, then there'll be a penalty?
The way it works with construction management at risk is that you develop a relationship with the contractor and you get a guaranteed maximum price. That will happen around January of 2019, and we'll live with that price, including whatever contingencies we allow, and those are owner contingencies that we have. So we'll have a guaranteed maximum price somewhere early in 2019. That's part of the reason we go with construction management at risk. And if you want a detailed schedule, please contact us, and we'll provide you a more detailed schedule.
Thank you.
That's not a problem.
okay, it was Jean, Ollie, and Phyllis, Merle, and Harvey.
You know, if you have concern about homeowners in town who have a reduced income and would have difficulty paying this increase in taxes, we have a tax assistance program in this town for disabled and elderly homeowners. And if you're at a fortunate income level, that you can put $100 in that envelope at least once a year. It is tax deductible if you're at the level where you're going to be deducting, you know, from your federal and state taxes. It is a charitable deduction. If everybody did $100 a year, people in town who needed the help would be able to get it. I just want to make that comment.
Thank you. Holly? Wait for me. And we'll go to Phyllis and Harvey, and that's going to have to be it. Because people are working today.
Holly Clark, I live on Central Avenue. So I have 2 questions that are kind of connected. One goes back to the energy question from earlier. I haven't seen anywhere anything about any renewable energy sources, any definitive efforts to minimize energy. And I realize it's a bigger building. I actually saw, we had done a study a few years ago about how to save buildings, and one of the suggestions in the police station was to turn off a light in one of the hallways, and I was thinking, oh, now we're going to have the lights that work, and we're going to want, hopefully we have it designed correctly so that we have them where we need them. But there are so many, smart building advances that can limit energy intake, and I just haven't seen anything written anywhere about what we've done. So one question is that information somewhere? The second part is, if it's not, what is the process for folks, assuming we are going forward, for folks to come forward and say, you know, what else can we do here and how can we improve it? Like maybe we want to have the capability to have electric police cars going forward. So we want to have charging stations like planned for as part of this because we want it to last going forward. Maybe we want to say we want more trees outside because trees help reduce carbon and will look nicer. And the other thing I was thinking in terms of parking, this is a more pedestrian request, but a lot of my neighbors are hearing, oh, we're going to have more parking, and they're thinking, that'll be great, it'll be easier to go to CVS, and then if the plan is to kind of have it segregated off so it's really for the officers and firefighters, and I'm not contradicting that conception, but is there a process going forward where if folks said, you know, it might make more sense to let this section be open for some CVS people, or maybe we want to make it not segregated at all. Maybe we want to make it a little smaller because we want to encourage people, you know, to not drive as much. I mean, so
Okay.
It's kind of a process question. What has been done so far, and how can people come forward?
So the short answer is the PBBC meets every other Monday, generally in this room, and they always welcome anyone to be there. Second, with respect to the parking, I think we have committed to, once the station is open and operating, to see whether there's a different way that it can be configured. There is a dedicated public safety lot that's proposed for School Street. We are proposing that be dedicated to public safety, the visitors who are in there, and there are a lot more than you might think, but that it be available at night so that, you know, either for the CVS block or when we have an even more thriving Chestnut Street, that lot will be available. Also, presumably, anybody who's going to the police station now is parking in the major lots, so there'd be some overlap. But we have committed to taking a look at that once it's up and running and operational. And again, any feedback on that front can be addressed during the construction to the PPPC and afterwards to the selectmen. With respect to energy efficiency, I mean, this is a 2022, 2021 building. Every modern efficiency that architects dream up will be in there. It was determined that public safety buildings, because of the reliability of energy, are at least in our area, they're not solar or solar ready. Maybe George could speak to that if that's the particular question. But with your question about light sensors, you know, yes, of course, light sensors, the type of heating and cooling that we're using are all the most modern, and they will actually be energy efficient. I don't know, George, if you wanted to add to that.
Well, I think you've answered it pretty well, but we have included so many different pieces of information in terms of how energy efficient. I'll just make the comment that roofs today are designed to be solar ready in the future, whether we like it or not. They're designed so that you could put solar on them later, and that's helped us, for example, at the Sunita Williams School. We made the decision after the project was bid whether or not we could afford to put solar panels on there. And the roof was going to be solar ready anyway, and so we're going to be adding solar panels to that school project. I'm not saying we'd add them to the police and fire station project. It depends on a lot of things, but part of the reason why we didn't include things like that is because of the cost of the project as it is. We tried to keep it as low as possible. But generally speaking, all of our buildings are designed to be energy efficient in every respect. If you look at the entire envelope of the building, every aspect of that is designed to be energy efficient. Windows, roof, sidewalls, it doesn't matter. Every aspect of it. Lighting systems, HVAC systems are much more efficient now than they were, and we focus on energy efficiency in all of those systems when we design them. So the building is about as energy efficient as you can be today without putting things like solar and windmills on them. That's probably the best answer I can give you. If you want more detail, I'd be glad to do that at some time in the future.